said recently you feel like you have a clear picture in goal as well, which has been a big
Yeah,
question mark of who the number one
yeah,
might be.
I think so. I think, as I've stated before, I think it would be naive of me to work towards preparing for a major tournament when you've got goalkeepers that have less than 5 caps, not establishing more experiences for some of them, so that we're in a position that whoever is the number one goalkeeper or the number two or three, that they're as prepared as they possibly can be. And as I said, I think that's becoming clearer every day.
This group that you're coming in with will be largely domestic based, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
2 games against Ireland. I think the big one, maybe for the external folks anyway, the game at the end of this window against Canada on July 2nd. Typically, a little bit more to that game, U.S. and Canada, and then this will be the first meeting for you with Casey Stoney on the other side as well with Canada, an old WSL matchup of coaches, right? What are you looking forward to in that game, and even that head to head again with from a tactical coaching perspective?
I think it doesn't matter who the opponent is. I still feel when you play for the US Women's National Team, you constantly got to strive to be better than you were the last performance. So build on the last camp, build on the performances there, build on some of the patterns of play and the rotations that we are developing. Continue to demand the excellent standards, both from a training perspective and in-game perspective. Continue to improve our set pieces, um, and our all-round game plan, and make sure we're tough to beat. And also, we're a team that are creating chances and putting them away. Like, of course, playing Ireland will be a much different game to playing Canada, but I view every game as another opportunity for us to get closer to the best version of ourselves. And I'm just looking forward to it, no matter who they are.
You mentioned your 1 year mark. We've just surpassed
Mm.
that for your official start to the job anyway. I'm wondering, I mean, how are you continuing? You've talked about having your own, I might get the terminology wrong, you correct me, performance coach or a
Yeah.
form of self-evaluation. How are you kind of doing that self-evaluation, going through your own methods and making sure that you stay sharp?
I do so much. I've got my own, performance development plan where I set objectives for myself around my own learning, whether that's a myriad of different leadership groups that I'm in, developing best ways to bring the best out of people to, uh, I've been touring the world, seeing some of the best coaches. Sometimes I can't. You've got the beautiful ability on Zoom to connect with people in various different sports around best strategies, to continuing to hire the very best into the US Women's National Team that can help support the team. I think is one way, and I have daily reflections and daily feedback within my own coaching team. I work in a really high performance environment that is constantly looking for the right critical corrections to keep elevating the program. And I've said this so many times, I'm so proud to represent, the Crest, but not just because of the quality of the players, but the quality of the people that I work with. They create such an incredible environment that's striving, for the very best all the time. And for this reason, I absolutely love it.
And you mentioned talking to some other coaches. You've talked about Sir Alex
Yeah.
a lot in your books and connecting with him. What have you, I mean, you've learned a lot from him. I mean, whether him or maybe if you can share some others who you've talked to recently that you've connected
Yeah.
with.
I mean, yesterday it was Jenny Buchek, the assistant of the Pacers, Sandy, the head coach of the New York Liberty, Andrew Webster, the head coach of New Zealand Warriors rugby league team, and Tanya West, the coach of Perth netball team. Like, had a great round table session with them yesterday in and around gratitude, and we all spoke about our pride for Jenny and how well the Pacers are doing and the remarkable work she does. And These are people that I gain valuable insights off. I've learned a lot off of her and Sandy, particularly in recent weeks. And listen, I've made no secret of the fact I've become such a big fan of the WNBA, and I've been able to forge great relationships with many coaches across women's sports, and these are just a few at this current juncture. I'm on another leadership group this evening. I'm very much looking forward to that. And listen, I'm always someone who pushes myself. That won't ever change. And I must do that in order to coach the best team in the world. I've got to make sure I'm at the front end of getting better and improving myself so that I can help our players.
Last one for me, you'll be watching from afar, women's Euros, or maybe not that far actually. You're still based over in England at the moment. What are you expecting from that tournament? Who do you like? And I guess I'd be remiss not to ask about England. What you think of them? Obviously, Mary Earp's situation. I mean, what do you make of them?
Well, I mean, it will be nice to be back in Europe during the Euros. Certainly had a lot of international camps in the last couple of months. I think England, Spain, Germany, the top three for the tournament. Of course, coaches always have selection dilemmas, and Serena has, made decisions to go with the players she had, which, I always respect the decision of coaches. And I know that England have an extremely competitive group, maybe lack that experience from the players that are not there, but they take huge experience in other areas and great potential. I think Spain have clearly been one of the best teams in the world in recent years. And Germany, I was so impressed with them in the Olympics last year. I think they've been improving throughout the year. And I think if France can get things right in every game, they too will be a threat this summer. But I know it would be a top tournament with teams that I certainly need to know everything about, considering they are teams I expect to face in the future. It's really, really difficult for us to face teams like England and Spain with the Nations League. It's really hard to calendarize these games, so I need to see them firsthand to be prepared for that.
Well, Emma Hayes, thank you for joining us on Football W.
You're welcome, Jeff. Thanks.
Is she as great as she seems, Jeff?
Yeah. No, I first started covering Emma when she was the Chicago Red Stars coach, 2009. So she's talked about that journey. It's been quite a journey from, if those of us who remember that year, and she's talked about it openly, not a good season, not a great debut to the professional coaching ranks. Obviously, a lot of factors to that, and then goes from there. I think people forget she was with the Western New York Flash in a role there after that, and then obviously the success at Chelsea, and I think I have put this on paper in voting mechanisms, best coach in the world at times throughout that stretch, and again, we saw it this past year.
Yeah, and we could argue that for her right now, but what's so impressive about Emma, there are a lot of things, right, that we can talk about her, but what stood out to me, at least in this conversation, is how she talked about the W. And she's like, I'm a huge fan of WNBA now. And she's talking about how she's constantly learning and evolving. And I think it's just so special that someone so spectacular already is still finding ways to improve and to improve for her players, which clearly is the biggest motivation here. Were you surprised that she mentioned WNBA?
No, I mean, she's talked about these things when I've been on the road with the U.S. I mean, last year, I remember they went out to Colorado. They were in the Denver area. She met up with Deion Sanders. Then they went to Minneapolis. We followed them, and she was with Cheryl Reeve. I think she's just a coaching sponge, maybe even just a leadership sponge. She's written books. She's talked about her relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson and learning from him. And I think I said this last week, that they're obviously great coaches tactically, and she's in that conversation and part of that, but also, especially at this level, and especially with this team, I would say, you have to have that people management skill, and you have to understand how to get the best out of everybody, that answer is different for each individual, and that is a very difficult practice. I won't say that I'm amazing at that. I think very few people are, but she studies that craft. I would say, I'm not I'm not sitting next to her every minute of the day, but I would say it seems like she studies that piece of everything as much as she's talking tactics and analyzing game film. Is how can I be better? How can I motivate this individual times 24, 26, 50 even in the pool? And how do I get the best out of everybody?
It's always an opportunity to learn in every single situation. And Emma Hayes, I like that you called her a coaching sponge, because that seems to be what she is. And it was totally worth it. U.S. women's national team, she goes in one of her books saying how they had the patience with her when she was going obviously through a personally very difficult situation with a very heavy loss at the time. And that really stood out to her, that they had that patience, take your time, come in when you can. And she had very little time to prep for these Olympics. So we're nearing now a full year with the U.S. women's national team. How would you grade her in the last year that we've seen her with the national team?
Well, I mean, it's a A+. I mean, I don't know if we want to give out perfect scores, but I mean, to come in and have 4 games where you're actually on the sideline before the Olympics, your 10th game is lifting an Olympic gold medal or putting it around your neck. I think that's better than anybody could have asked for, because to your point, the situation was unprecedented. And, you know, you mentioned her dad had just died. Mm-hmm. This job comes up. Chelsea meant everything to her. She wanted to finish the season. That wait was the longest interim wait the U.S. women's national team has ever had. And, you know, Twyla Kilgore, let's give her credit, obviously did a great job in guiding that ship. But I think inherently, even though it was never spoken by Matt Crocker or anybody at U.S. Soccer, there was a concession here that it's okay if you don't win the Olympics because we hired you to win the 2027 World Cup. Well, now you won the Olympics. The 2027 World Cup is still the ultimate goal, but I mean, you can't ask for anything more in that situation. And then to do that while turning over the roster, obviously making decisions in real time. Alex Morgan was a huge decision to not bring her to the Olympics. And then 24 first-time call-ups under Emma Hayes, you know, to turn over the roster in a way that we haven't seen. And I would say, to be fair, in previous cycles, hasn't been an opportunity afforded. I would say certainly to Vlatko Nanovsky with the pandemic and some other things, but it's the turnover piece that's been asked about or that's been called for. It's the winning. It's both combined in a way that you couldn't ask for anything more.
She's definitely leading that change in leadership that we had seen with the U.S. women's national team. Alex Morgan being one of them. The retirements that we've seen lately, Becky Sauerbrunn, just to name one that we've seen as of late. So she was the woman for the job, and U.S. women's national team clearly knew that. And we asked Michelle Cooper about, or you asked her specifically, about the new faces that we're seeing constantly, which is a challenge in and of itself for Emma Hayes as well. But the way that all of these players talk about her, we know that it's obviously a privilege and so much pride to be able to wear that shirt for these players that have been working for this opportunity their whole lives. But the way that everybody talks about Emma Hayes, it's really impressive.
Well, I think part of it too is, and we've heard some players say this, is there's a very direct nature about her communication. I think we see that a little bit in the media side as well, which is not always a given with coaches, right? And if you're a player, yes, I want to be starting. I want to be, you know, a big piece of this, but there's 11 spots to do that. There's, you know, 26 or so on a roster at any given time, and you're not always going to be starting, and maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you're not good enough to be called in. And from everything we've heard, that communication is clear and direct, which is all you can ask for. If you're not good enough, you're probably not happy with that messaging, right? But at least it's been delivered in a way that you have clarity of, this is where I'm at, this is where I stand, this is what I need to do to improve. And I think that you hear that from players top to bottom, of whether it's players getting dropped, it's players who are emerging into starters. I think you see that. And that generates a respect, because there's not a say one thing and do the other. I think that's probably, when you're a coach especially, one of the worst things you could potentially do. And you don't get that impression here.
Yeah, absolutely. So very much looking forward to that roster, which will drop tomorrow. Remind the audience, 9:30 Eastern.
That's what we're told, yeah.
9:30 Eastern time. You can review the roster with a cup of coffee in your hand. I will probably on my second, but yeah, every roster that we've seen has been just a little bit different, but then we're also kind of seeing some consistency in those starting 11s. Those players that we saw starting the year at the She Believes Cup, the January camp as well, and seeing them still being called back. And we're looking forward to what that roster will say for these friendlies here